On to another global story now. The World Economic Forum officially begins today in Davos in Switzerland under the theme Stakeholders for a Cohesive and Sustainable World. Yesterday, the International Monetary Fund, in its Global Economic Outlook report, lowered South Africa's growth forecast to 0.8% in 2020 from a previous 1.1%. The IMF has cited the country's electricity supply constraints, the slow pace of the implementation of structural reforms and a lack of policy certainty as impediments to growth for South Africa. For an update now, let's cross live to our colleague Liabo Setho. Liabo, a very good morning to you. As we were lining you up and I was trying to rush our production team, and I was saying she looks like she's so cold. One of our colleagues was saying, no, ugodola at Davos. It's not the same kind of ugodola as it would be anywhere else. Day one of the 50th session.
It's not the same kind of ugodola.
Day one of the 50th session. Oxfam is saying that inequality, the people who are attending there are contributing to inequality in the world.
Yes, that's right, Desiree. Good morning from Davos. You are correct with that Oxfam report that was issued yesterday about, wealth inequality. And when you look at a place like Davos and the World Economic Forum, and you look at the numbers concerned, you know that delegates pay about $27,000. Now, in rands, that would be around 398,000 rands to participate. This just tells you the kind of money that is circulating around here. But of course, Davos and Switzerland as a country don't have those kind of problems because some of the wealthiest people are found here. It is one of the most expensive countries in the world. But back to the meeting that we are here for, which is the World Economic Forum. It officially gets underway today, and some of Team South Africa delegates have touched down, and it will be interesting to see, what the schedule is like. But I thought that before we go into the Congress room and into the World Economic Forum, I'll give you just a brief synopsis of what the streets of Davos look like, and I'll ask my camera colleague Gawinjo Kweni to just pan to the back to give you, a view of the Alps at the back and the businesses around here. So it's business as usual. People are going about their business, while on the other side of town, about a few streets away from here, the conference has earnestly started to get underway. So the reason we have come to this part of Davos or the streets is that we've asked to meet with the managing director of wealth and investments at Old Mutual, Mr. Kaya Kopoto, to find out what Old Mutual is doing here at Davos, what conversations are they having and with whom. And he's joining me now, Desiree. Mr. Kopoto, thank you so much for making time to speak to us. You've been standing with me here in the cold.
Cold day. Amazing to be here, though. I mean, the world has descended on the Alpine slopes in Davos to conduct the kinds of conversations that shape the agenda and really are designed to change the world. And the reason we're here is in part because we are custodians of almost R1 trillion of the life savings of ordinary South Africans and Africans in general, given that we operate in a multitude of countries across the continent. And the part of the conversation we're most interested in is, gone are the days where we simply focus on allocating capital because we're interested in a unit of return. We now live in a world where we're talking about sustainable value creation that is shared in a way that is fair, in a way that is sustainable, and in a way that begins to impact positively precisely on some of the questions that you raised. The massive inequality between those who have and those who don't. And that's the part of the conversation that as Old Mutual we are massively, massively interested in.
I know some of your growth strategies also include disinvestments from other parts of the world to focus more into, the economy of South Africa. Tell us more about those plans.
Yeah, I mean, you'll recall managed separation. Managed separation was really about bringing Old Mutual back to Africa, right? So that's about focusing all of our activities predominantly on the African continent and in South Africa in particular. And that's why we're now primarily listed in South Africa. And the reason this is important, it means that we are able to deploy the very significant balance sheet that Old Mutual can bring to bear predominantly in South Africa and the balance of the continent.
Let's talk about issues back home. Those obviously have impacted on your reputation in a big way. What is the status quo? I know that we had a court that, granted the company leave to appeal the previous decision, but Mr. Moyo is going ahead, and he is going ahead with counter-appealing that as well. How is Old Mutual getting itself in such muddy waters when it's trying to make a name for itself out there?
I mean, let's be clear about a couple of things.
Yeah.
First and foremost, we owe a responsibility to our employees, we owe a responsibility to our customers, we owe a responsibility to our counterparties. So despite the noise created by this unfortunate incident, we have focused on those issues. We've focused on the responsibilities that I said we hold very dear. And I think we've conducted ourselves incredibly well on that front. I think the judgment that came out most recently makes our position very clear. It's, I would say, in many respects, a vindication of the very strong position that Old Mutual took. But that's not really the subject that I think we should be focusing on today. I mean, like I said, we've descended on the Alpine slope in Davos to talk about those issues that really are about changing the world. I mean, our very personal issues that relate to Old Mutual specifically are one thing. I mean, I think the nature of the agenda of the day is so much broader than the very specific Old Mutual issues.
I'm sure some of our viewers who are maybe your customers would like to disagree with that, but I'll respect that. And say that. Let's talk about your schedule for the rest of the day. Who are you meeting with? What kind of important meetings will you be having, and what kind of conversations will you be having?
I mean, from a personal point of view, as representing Old Mutual, there are three types of engagements that I'll be having. One is with counterparties. So in other words, organizations very similar to the one I'm responsible for, being a wealth and investment business. So any organization that is a global retirement fund, so you'll find that in a place like Davos, there's a multitude of very large retirement funds. There are sovereign wealth funds, as well as fund managers, not too dissimilar from the one that we are. And really those conversations are about recognizing how rapidly the way change is impacting the fund management industry and the changes that our customers are expecting from us. And so we are conducting the conversations to enable us to begin to make the necessary adjustments to our own business so that we can serve our customers better as the world changes.
To what extent are the growth projections that the IMF have made downwards for South Africa are going to impact those, the fund managers that you mentioned and all the plans that you have?
If you think about the single most important thing that our customers want us to talk about, the single most important pressure and concern that they have is the fact that returns have been lackluster for the last 5 years, predominantly in South Africa. And so when you see growth expectations being downgraded, it does put some pressure on the expectations of prospective returns. The positive side, however, is that because returns have been so poor for the better part of 5 years, our valuations in South Africa, in other words, the price at which you can buy good assets, has come down to a level that gives us the confidence that future returns should be substantially better than past returns, despite the poor, economic conditions that the downgrade in growth expectations imply. I think if you think about the challenges that we've got to resolve beyond growth, it's a tragedy of confidence, right? I think that's the single most significant challenge that we've got to confront, because the absence of confidence means people don't invest. Yeah. It means that foreigners don't have the confidence to allocate capital to the country in particular. It means South African corporates themselves will wait for better days before they allocate their substantial balance sheets to future projects in the country. So the ability to solve some of the present issues, take Auscom as the obvious one, are critical in catalyzing the kind of confidence that I think will ignite the country and take us back to a growth trajectory.
Mr. Kopoto, thank you so much. I've kept you here in the cold for far too long. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Thank you. Desiree, that was Kaya Kopoto. He's the Managing Director for Wealth and Investments at Old Mutual. Had a long chat here there about their plans here. And of course, he's also quite concerned about the growth projections that the IMF have made downwards for the economy. And he's part of Team South Africa. We will be speaking to government officials as well here. Some of them, I believe, are only arriving later this afternoon. They would have been coming from the summit in the UK. But trust Team SABC to bring you all the coverage of the World Economic Forum here in Davos.
Liabo, while we have you, quite an intriguing conversation there, and you was talking about the absence of confidence. You've touched on that report about the downward spiral of the economy, but there's also that other report about social mobility in South Africa being held back by the lack of quality education and quality healthcare. What is being said about that report?
Well, you want to know that that index, the Social Mobility Index, was the first of its kind that was launched here, Desiree, and it ranked South Africa at number 77 out of 82 countries. And of them, the quality of education, the quality of life is one of the things that are measured in that report. So the World Economic Forum that has compiled that report really suggesting that policymakers should try to do something about that so that, those rankings improve. But of course, it was the first of its kind that it was released there. And there is indeed a lot of work, apart from economic problems that need to be solved in South Africa. There are indeed social issues that need to be solved. And that report saying that if a social mobility is increased by at least 10% across the world, economy, so the world economy could increase by 5% over 10 years. Of course, that is significant if it can be done. But of course, each country has its own issues, its own problems, and can most probably work at this at its own pace. But yes, South Africa being ranked number 77 out of that social mobility report that was released yesterday out of 82 countries, Desiree.
Liabo Setho is in Davos.